Hey, what's up everyone? Nick here, and welcome to a solo play quick start guide for what has become one of my wife and I's favorite tabletop games, Escape the Dark Castle. This is a cooperative adventure fantasy horror themed game where you and a group of prisoners essentially flip cards of a chapter deck and try to make it through the Dark Castle alive. It's a lot of fun. It's a fantastic cooperative adventure, but it's also a very fun solo game. So in this video, I'm not just going to flip through the rulebook, even though it is short. Essentially what I'm going to do is just a quick start guide where I go through the mechanics, the setup, and a couple of turns just to introduce a few of the elements that the game might throw at you. Really, the point of this is that I'm going to be making Let's Play videos of this game. So for anyone viewing those who has no familiarity with Escape the Dark Castle, you can watch the quick start guide just to get a feel for how this game actually works and what it is you're going to be seeing in those playthrough videos. So let's go ahead and jump into the guide. All right, so let's go ahead and get started with the solo play quick start guide for Escape the Dark Castle. So for this game, when you play solo mode, essentially what you do is you pretend like there's two players. So you pick two characters as if you were playing with a buddy, and instead you just play by yourself and you control both characters separately. So it's kind of what we call two-handed solo mode. Now, other than that, the mechanics are completely the same. In the instruction manual, there's only two changes for solo mode that they mention, and it pretty much references some of the wording on cards and in the instructions. So for example, if a card were to come up that said, do something per player, there's only one player, but there's two characters. So you would do it per character. Another one, which we'll get to in a moment, is when you flip cards, you, in a normal game, have to choose which player is going to actually flip the card. So since you're the only player, you choose which character has to flip the card. Otherwise, the game is going to stay exactly the same. But for those of you who have never seen this game and want to watch along my playthrough videos, let's go ahead and do a quick introduction. So I've already talked about what the game is in the intro for this video, so let's just go ahead and get familiar with the board state. So first in the center here we have our chapter deck. This is the crucial part of the game. We're just going to be flipping cards one by one, resolving their effects, fighting the monsters, trying to make it out of the Dark Castle. The deck next to that is our item cards. So throughout the game, we're going to have chances to draw items. These could be things like potions, elixirs, or even weapons. And when we get items, we can give them to our characters. Here, these black die, these are going to be our chapter die, which serve a number of different purposes throughout the game. It's basically us rolling our dice against the chapter dice. And then on our left here, we have our two characters that I've chosen for this quick start guide, our Abbot and our Miller. When you're playing 1 to 2 players, each character starts with 18 health. Now, the game does come with a scratch pad that you can keep track of health. I like to just use D20s. And then you're going to have your specific character die. So I actually got these mixed up. So this die is going to say Abbot because it belongs to the Abbot. This die is going to say Miller because it belongs to the Miller. And these dice are going to correlate with the attributes of your character. So, for example, our Miller, these three symbols, the eyeball is going to be cunning. He has 4 cunning. The fist is going to be might. He has 3 might. And then the little star here is wisdom, and he has 1 wisdom. So basically, when you look at this character card, you would say, oh, he has a lot of cunning, a good amount of might, and not a lot of wisdom. And so then if you look at this character's die, you'll see 1 cunning there, 2 on this side, so 3 total. There's 4. So he has 4 sides of this die have a cunning symbol on it, whereas wisdom only has the 1. And you could do, a similar count for might. But the point being, these dice are going to match the attributes on your character because they are the character die. All right. Otherwise, we just got a dice tray here to keep our dice rolls nice and contained. And that's pretty much the entire board setup. Now, normally when you play, this chapter deck is going to have a top card, a hidden bottom card, and then 15 cards in the middle. For the sake of this, I only have 3 cards in there that show a couple of the points in the game that I'd like to highlight. But otherwise, that's the setup. And then we're just going to walk through a couple turns to kind of show how you play. So, what you do first, every time you go to flip a card, you have to pick a character to make the flip. Now, for this first card, I don't think it matters, but we're going to say something like, let's say the Miller is going to flip this card. That could be important because some cards will flip, and the card will say something like, you must do a skill check. When it says you, it's referencing the character that flipped the card. So let's have our Miller flip this first card. So we would take the first card of our chapter deck and flip it over. And a big part of this game is the atmosphere. It's the fun, it's the artwork on the cards, it's the creepy text. I'll go ahead and read this first card, but I'm not going to read the lore text for every card because I just want to highlight the gameplay here. But for an example, because this card will start the top of every deck in every game you play. After years of incarceration in the depths of the dark castle, you finally break free of your cell. In a small stone room adjoining the cell block stands an old wooden chest. The lock is open. Draw an item card per player now. You hear footsteps approaching. You must not linger here. You make for the exit, slipping away and disappearing into the darkness. Turn the first chapter card now. So, I kept reading the text, but right here is our first instruction. Draw an item card per player, and remember for solo mode, that's going to be per character. So what we would do is draw 2 item cards. We have a Rotten Shield and an Elixir of Insight. Now, anytime you draw item cards is a chance for you to redistribute items among your characters. So if my character had already been holding a sword and a potion, and we said, oh, he really wants that shield, he could drop his potion, pick up the shield, and then our abbot here could go ahead and take the potion that he had. Otherwise, the only other time you can trade items freely is after every chapter, but not during the chapter. So, for our introduction here, let's go ahead and we will give the Rotten Shield to our Miller, and we'll give the Elixir of Insight to our abbot. So the shield obviously, gives him a little bit of protection to his HP. The Elixir of Insight allows you to discard before any round of combat to change any chapter die to show a trait of your choice. So we'll highlight that a little later. All right, that's everything we've done here. So now we need to pick again which character is going to flip the next card. Since my Miller here has a little bit of protection from the shield, I'm going to have him flip the card. So we'll flip. And we'll ignore the lore text for this one. And immediately it just says, you lose 1 HP. And remember, you references the character that flipped the card. So our Miller here would normally go from 18 to 17. However, if we look at our Rotten Shield, whenever you would lose HP, reduce the amount by 1. However, it's down to a minimum of 1. So that could have helped us. You could see why we'd want the Miller to flip just in case in this scenario. Unfortunately, that down to a minimum of 1 makes this attack go through. So our Miller will lose 1 HP, dropping down to 17. Now you win the game by getting through the entire chapter deck. You lose the game as soon as either of your characters goes down to 0 health. Now finally, draw 2 item cards. So we will once again draw 2 item cards. So we got a partially rotten apple and an Elixir of Insight. Typically your character can hold 2 items, unless it's a 2-handed item like a heavy axe, then they can only hold the 1. So let's go ahead and have our Miller pick up this partially rotten apple, and we'll have our abbot pick up the Elixir of Insight. Now, these items can be used at any time, unless the card says otherwise. So our Miller, who just picked up this partially rotten apple, let's go ahead and have him eat it. And if you read this, you can discard to restore 1 HP to your character. So we will discard, I'm just going to put it off to the side, that rotten apple, and our Miller will regain the 1 HP he just lost. Our abbot, meanwhile, has 2 Elixirs of Insight. All right, we are good now. So this was just kind of a resolution type chapter card. You flip, you resolve, it's done. I'm going to show you two other kinds here. So once again, we're going to have our Miller flip. And this is going to be a skill check. So let's skip the lore test. Each player must try to roll a double in one attempt. For each player, success, you make it through, surfacing on the other side. The lore text here is that you're trying to swim through an underground lake in a cave. Failure, you begin to flounder, lose 1 HP and try again. If you have not succeeded after 3 attempts, you make it through, breathless and exhausted. So here's a skill check where in this case, we are trying to roll for doubles, which is the double icon on your character dice. Sometimes you might be rolling for wisdom, sometimes cunning, sometimes might. In this case, we're just rolling for any double. So in this case, it says each player makes this skill check. So that means each character. So we're going to take our 2 character die, give them a roll. And look at that. Here's our Miller on the right, I'll keep it, and our Abbott. So our Miller rolled a double. So first try, he makes it through, he suffers no damage. Our Abbott, unfortunately, he floundered, he didn't succeed the skill check, he's going to drop down to 17 health. So now our Miller no longer has to make this skill check, but our Abbott has to do it again. There we go, double. So our Abbott only failed 1 time. Had he failed 3 times, then he would have lost 3 health and you keep going. But otherwise, that was a pretty good skill check. We only lost 1 health among 2 characters. You read the rest of the card, you resolve it, there's nothing left to resolve, so we can flip. Once again, we'll have our Miller flip. So here we go. Now we get faced against some demonic-looking skeleton warrior. Again, you can read the lore text, highly recommended, but let's go ahead and jump straight to combat. So as a group, choose one option. You can either flee, so as you run, you are hacked by the Revenant. You lose 3 HP. Fight, begin combat. So in this case, we're actually given a choice. You're not always given this choice. You could either flee and just the character that flipped the card is going to lose 3 health, or you can fight and hope that you don't lose that much health from just fighting. You're going to find by playing this game that sometimes it's more advantageous to flee than fight, or vice versa. For the sake of this video, let's go ahead and choose fight. So when it comes to setting up combat, you're going to look at these dice symbols in the bottom left corner of the card. So first, you're going to find any of the symbols, wisdom, cunning, or might, that are here, and take the number of die that you see and line them up next to the character. So this character has 1 wisdom. So that's this character's chapter dice. But then, if you see this little person icon, that means they get a mystery chapter dice per character. So in this case, 2. So what we're going to do is take 2 chapter die, roll them into the dice tray, and we got 2 cunnings. So now we have 3 dice total, and we're going to make attack rolls with our characters. And if we roll these symbols, we can remove them from combat, and we win combat once this character has no more dice. So you can kind of see here, we have 2 cunning. So our Miller is really well equipped for this fight because he has very high cunning, but our Abbott has low cunning. However, our Abbott also has very high wisdom, whereas our Miller doesn't. So these 2 characters kind of work off one another. So we're going to start combat, and we see combat special. All players may fight as normal, but you are the only player the giant attacks, and you may not rest. So I had my Miller flip this card. So for this combat, the Miller cannot rest, and when this guy makes an attack, it's only going to go towards the Miller. Normally, you can choose a character to have rest for each round of combat, as I'll show you. And then you can have, when an enemy attacks, it attacks every player simultaneously. So let's go ahead and start the first round of combat. And what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to let both characters participate. So you always have to have at least one. So I'm going to have both characters participate in this attack. So we're going to take both characters' character dice. We're going to roll them. And wow. So here's what happens. I rolled double fists for both characters.
There are no fist icons on this character's chapter dice, so we don't remove any of the dice. However, what happens next is the character attacks us. This character deals 2 damage per attack. Now, normally, each character would take 2 damage. So the abbot would go to 15 and our miller would go to 16. However, per this character, he's only going to attack the miller. So normally, our miller would go down to 16. However, our miller rolled a double, and every double is surrounded by this shield icon. When you roll a double on your attack attempt, if you get a shield, that means you block this enemy's next attack. So in this case, we take no damage, and the first round of combat is over, and we're just going to keep going through rounds until either we die or our enemy dies. So let's go ahead and just repeat what we did for round 1. And there we go. So our abbot rolled a wisdom, so we'll remove this wisdom from the dice pool. And our miller rolled a might, so unfortunately there's no might. So the enemy is still alive, therefore it's going to make its attack, and the miller is going to have to take that attack for 2. However, our miller has a shield, and it reduces damage by 1. So he's only going to drop down to 17 health. Now what I'm going to do is start round 3 of combat. And I'm going to say that my abbot here is going to rest. So for this attack, my abbot's not going to contribute. He's going to stay to the side and rest. And when a character rests, they gain 1 HP. So our abbot will go back up to 18. And our miller here is going to be the only character that contributes to this attack. So let's go ahead and roll. A fist. So once again, we fail. This guy's going to hit us, and he's going to hit us for 1 because of our shield negating some of that damage. And now we're just going to kind of rinse and repeat. So I'm just going to try to have both characters go for this. So let's do it here. Oh my gosh, so 2 wisdoms. So we fail. He's going to lose another health. We're going to just try again. There we go. Finally. So we rolled 2 cunnings. There's 2 cunnings on the board, so those are going to be removed. Our enemy, has no more dice, so he is defeated, and we are done with combat. Now, every time you defeat an enemy, you get to draw 1 item card. So we will draw the Distilled Wisdom, and now this is another chance for us to move items around and things like that. But for sake of this being short, I'll just put the Distilled Wisdom to our miller here. All right, so like I said, a normal game, you're going to have 15 of these cards to flip. For this, I just put down 3. And eventually, if you're still alive, you're going to reach the final card here. This represents the final boss. There are 3 in the core box. You shuffle them up at the beginning, choose 1 at random, and put it on the bottom of the deck. Once you make it here, you get ready. You're probably going to be very low in health. We're going to choose who flips the door. It's going to be the miller. And so now we will flip this card to reveal the Dark One. As you enter the Dark One's presence, any items you are carrying vaporize. Other players keep theirs. Discard them now. So right away, our miller here, since he's the one that flipped that card, is going to lose his 2 items. So that is tough. And then what we would do is set up our dice. So you could see the Dark One has 1 cunning and 3 wisdoms, and then 2 mystery dice. And we rolled a cunning and a wisdom. Wow, no mites. And so now that our character here has its chapter dice, we would just go ahead and start combat as normal. And we can maybe do something like this. So I could say, I'm going to use an elixir of insight. Discard before any round of combat to change any chapter die to show a trait of your choice. So I'll change this cunning into a wisdom, because why not? And you know what? I'll even do it with my abbot too. So I'll change this one to a might, because, you know, that's just what I want to do. And then I would proceed with combat just as I had before, and we would hopefully destroy the Dark One. So there you go. That is a quick start guide to solo mode. I just wanted to walk you through the board state, some of the different types of cards you'll flip, and that way, once I start my playthrough series, you'll be able to kind of hit the ground running and enjoy watching. All right, hope you guys enjoyed.
All right, there you have it. So I'm really excited to make some playthrough videos of this. There's no campaign, there's no overarching story or anything like that. But in the quick start guide, you saw that final boss, and I mentioned that that was just one of 3 in the core set. So my plan for playing this game on video is essentially just to, even though you're supposed to pick the final bosses at random, I'll still pick the chapter cards at random, but the final boss, I'll pick one and then play until I beat it. And then in the next video, we'll take on the other boss and then the other boss. And if we make it through all 3 bosses and we still want more, there are some expansions for this game, which I've been wanting to pick up anyway, so we can also tackle those as well. All right, thank you for watching. Hope this video was fun. Hope it helped you learn the game a little bit, and I look forward to seeing you in the playthrough videos. All right, see you later.